Sorry to keep you waiting.
Donna, you
I got on this all the time.
done that before?
Oh my gosh.
You're not typing it, are you? You're not typing it, are you?
It is going to YouTube.
We've got other business, don't we? Yeah. We have that too. John will be late, so we can start without him.
Okay.
Are we going to start without John? He said he won't be back.
Okay, so we're making a what's
Cool.
That's the way to put
Invest in build a C-store.
It's not right.
Interesting. Took a year.
That's the same from last time?
Seriously, maybe.
I got over one and then I got another one.
Laid out.
These children, they go to school. My brother and my dad fly a lot, so. Call it. I call this hearing to order at 9:05 a.m. And I will turn gavel over to Officer.
All right, good morning, everyone. Just for the record, this is May 16th, it's a little after 9 o'clock, and we're back on the record in the contest case proceeding. And if I remember correctly, Mr. Fry, you were presenting Black Jewel's case in chief, is that right? And then I apologize to the witness who we cut off yesterday, but we were finished with one witness and you were about to call another witness. Is that right? All right, you may proceed. Will you raise your hand to be sworn? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, subject to the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Brockman.
Good morning.
Counsel? Yes. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I just need to know for the record that one of the council members, Councilmember Core, is not with us at this time, but will be joining us later, and we'll make a record when he appears. Otherwise, I think we have the same council members as yesterday. Is that right? Right. I'm getting an indication, yes. I'm sorry for that interruption. I just felt like you needed to put that on the record.
Seeing
none?
I'm up on.
Okay.
So same council members as yesterday, except Councilmember Core will be joining us later, and we'll make it. Okay. Sorry with that interruption. Please go ahead and question the witness.
Certainly. Mr. Brockman, could you please introduce yourself to the council?
My name is Bob Brockman. I'm from Wheatland, Wyoming, and pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for letting me go early yesterday. Appreciate it.
Mr. Brockman, what is your profession?
I'm a real estate appraiser and a real estate broker.
And what did you do to earn those titles?
Testing on both of them,
Okay.
education.
All right, let's start with the testing. What sort of testing have you gone through?
It's been a long time with the general appraiser. I think that was in the early 80s when certification and licensing began. Prior to that, there was no licensing or certification. Came about as a federal bill, I believe, FIREA. The federal government, in a nutshell, needed somebody to blame for the S&L crisis, and so we're gonna pick on the appraisers and make sure that they're certified and they're educated and tested, and that's how it all began.
And you passed all of those tests?
Yes, sir.
And about how long have you been, what's the right term, a certified appraiser?
I want to say in 1989 is when it came about. The appraisal subcommittee mandated to all the states in the United States that you will have an appraisal board and you will have certification and licensing, and there was sometime around between 88 and I think 89. I think 90 we were already in.
Can you explain to the council your education background, your schooling to become an appraiser?
There's a variety of professional organizations that offer education that are accepted by the appraisal board. My emphasis has been primarily with the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. And I have taken some education from the Appraisal Institute, which is an older organization. Also, I think it's been around, both of them, since 1930s. The Appraisal Institute kind of focuses on the commercial, industrial aspect of appraising, whereas the society focuses on agriculture and a lot of condemnation work.
What is ARA, the Accredited Rural Appraisal designation that you hold?
That was a designation that was conferred upon me. That required testing, oral examination. I had to submit a demonstration report. It had to pass, and I think it was, when it was all said and done, it was a 3-day affair, and it culminated in 2 days of written testing and 1 day of oral examination.
Is it fair to say that in order to appraise land in Wyoming, you have to be licensed?
You know, you don't.
Okay.
No, we are not mandatory. Anybody can say, I am an appraiser, and they can appraise. If you say you're a certified appraiser, then that's a no-no.
Okay. But to be a certified appraiser, you're a certified appraiser?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And in order to do certified appraisals in Wyoming, you have to have a certification.
Yes, you do.
You can't just walk off the street, do an internet search and say, this is a certified appraisal.
That's correct.
Okay. Sir, have you? Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Mr. Hearing Officer, at this moment, I'd like to move that Mr. Brockman be admitted to testify as an expert witness in appraisals.
Any objection from council?
No objection.
All right, your motion is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Mr. Brockman, I want to turn your attention now to the matter at hand. In 2017, you were asked to conduct an appraisal of the Bel Air and Black Thunder Ranch. Is that your recollection?
That's correct.
At the time that you were contacted to do an appraisal, did you know why you were doing an appraisal?
I did before I accepted the assignment. A gentleman with Contura, I believe, his first name was Mark, I don't recollect his last name. He was an attorney, and he somewhat interviewed me and asked about qualifications. He got my name from some other attorneys that I've done work for, and he explained what he wanted done and why. And if I remember right, I sent him an engagement proposal outlining that this is what I understand, the property, why we're doing it, where it's at, how much I'll charge, when I might get it done, and
So can you walk the council through your process after you accepted the assignment, what you did to appraise those ranches in 2017?
even before I sent the engagement letter, I did quite a bit of research on the property, both through Campbell County, and then, of course, we've got all kinds of aerial mapping and GPS and systems that I can plug that in and pretty well see it, just like you're in an airplane. And so I had a good feel for what I had, and then I did a preliminary research of my data files on sales in the area, similar property. Then I met with CJ Fisk, who is the land manager at that time for Contura. And I think we spent down here 2 days in duration bouncing around both those places. And then I think I went by again, cursory look again, then went back and got into the sales. I called other appraisers. Do you have anything? Here's what I'm doing. Can you send me stuff? Talk to real estate brokers. And so out of this data, I picked out what I thought were the most similar properties and did my appraisal. Sale data, if a ranch sells tomorrow and I get wind of it, I will try and call the buyer, the seller, real estate broker and say, hey, tell me about this. What did it sell for? How long had it been on the market? Why did they sell? Why did they buy? And obviously, I'd love to go look at the property, but that would be trespassing unless I had permission. So you drive by a county road, look as much as you can, get on Google Earth, get on the county GPS mapping and look at it, and you just confirm as much as you can. You need just about as much knowledge of a sale as you do the property you're appraising to compare them. When you're all said and done, then you have these two properties, the Bel Air and the Black Thunder. I treated them as two separate properties, and then pick the sales that you think are most similar, and you compare the property you're appraising to each one of those sales you select. Then when I'm all done, I look again at the whole database. Does this fit? Does what I feel my opinion of value, does it fit? Is it reasonable? And I put all of that in a report, and that's the appraisal.
Mr. Brockman, prior to completing the 2017 appraisal, had you ever conducted an appraisal before?
An appraisal before?
Sure.
Yes.
This wasn't your first appraisal?
No, it was not. No.
Do you have any estimation as to how many appraisals you had done prior to this one in 2017?
You know, I can tell you I did my first one in 1973 in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I don't have a clue how many since then.
Fair enough. And did you conduct this appraisal for these ranches any differently than you conducted other appraisals in the past?
No.
Did you treat the Bel Air or Eagle View ranches especially differently?
No.
Did you complete your appraisals through methods that are accepted in your industry, in your profession?
Yes. We are, for lack of a better word, under a Bible, it's called the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And that's pretty much the guidelines of what you will and won't do. There's another, like in condemnation for especially federal takings, there's uniform standards of federal land acquisitions, and they merge those together with USPAP. The federal rule supersedes the USPAP rule. And then with my designation in the society, we have some ancillary rules too, but they're pretty much the same as USPAP.
Have you ever served on a board in Wyoming related to appraisals?
I served on the state of Wyoming appraisal board for 2 terms, where they term on the 3-year term apiece.
Sir, do you hold to a reasonable degree of certainty in your field that the value you put in your appraisal in 2017 is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
In 2018, you were approached and asked to do a recertification of the appraisal. Do you remember that?
Yes, and I wasn't asked that. I was asked to do a new appraisal. And my communication was with Mr. CJ Fisk again. And I said, CJ, good heavens. I said, I don't think things have changed. And I said, do you really want to spend all that money to find out nothing's changed? And he said, well, what do you propose? And I said, let me research the market for sale to see if there's anything out there that would make me think that value changed, whether up or down. And I called him back and I said, I don't see any changes, none. I think it's the same as what I opined in 2017. And so I said, see if you can get by with just a letter from me stating that.
Would you look in front of you? I believe there's a three-ring binder, and it should be Exhibit DEQ 15. Can you turn to that, please?
Which one is it, 15?
15, yes, sir.
Okay.
Would you please take a moment and read that, just to refresh your recollection on this? Oh, sorry.
I read it.
Thanks. All right.
Yes, just recently.
Okay. All right. So do you still hold all your opinions that were expressed in 2017 and 2018 to a reasonable degree of certainty in your field that the value that you expressed then were true to the best of your ability?
At that time, yes, that's correct.
Absolutely. Council members, I have no further questions of Mr. Brockman and will turn his questioning to other attorneys. Thank you, Mr. Brockman.
Thank you.
All right, I know following our procedure, we would go DEQ next. Is that, do you want to do that, or do you want to go opposition, the objectors next?
You've done the last witness, BRC next. All of that.
Okay. If that's okay with everyone,
That's
Counsel?
fine.
Go ahead.
And Mr. Hearing Officer, I'll have to rely on your judgment if we get into some part of my questioning where we need to discuss an issue about going confidential. So
Okay.
just to be aware of that.
that's fine.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Rockman. How
Good
are you
morning.
doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. My first question is, did you meet or otherwise confer with counsel for the DEQ in preparing any of your testimony?
No,
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to ask. When you were asked to appraise this property for Contura, do you remember if the company discussed an amount they thought the property was worth with you?
no,
Did they discuss that they needed this appraisal for bonding collateral as part of their coal mine permit
yes,
procedures?
yes.
Okay, so you were aware that the appraisal you were doing would eventually be given to DEQ?
To the state of Wyoming, at DEQ.
Generally, okay, sure. All right, so I'm gonna pull up It's Contura Exhibit 1, which is labeled confidential.
Mr. Hearing Officer, I think this is the time, I've been on the edge of my seat waiting. We do assert that this document needs to remain confidential pursuant to the terms of the stipulated protective order. And I know that Powder River Basin Resource Council expressed some concerns regarding the open meeting nature of these proceedings. And so our proposal at this point, particularly in light of the stipulation that Powder River Basin Resource Council entered into with respect to this protective order, is that we don't feel compelled to ask any folks to leave or any of the people who might happen to be participating via the streaming of this proceeding. But we do ask that this document itself not be shared outside of these proceedings or outside of this room. And so we don't have an objection to them being displayed. Certainly we invite the council members to look at the exhibits and consider them even though they are confidential. And that would be our proposal on how to handle the objection that was raised at the beginning of the proceedings by the council.
Before I give the other attorneys an opportunity to respond to that, counsel, there is a protective order, and I think I've ratified it in my pretrial order, and it's binding on you attorneys, and it's binding on the parties within your control, and it's binding on the council members. But what if there are other people listening in?
So, Mr. Hearing Officer, from our perspective, we don't have a whole lot of heartburn over people listening to this information. I mean, obviously, the overall valuation that Mr. Brockman concluded in his report is already a matter of public record.
You mean the results of the numerical results of the appraisal?
Correct. But we do have concerns about the document itself being disseminated. And because we are not going to be sharing that outside of this room, we don't really have an objection beyond maintaining that confidentiality within the terms of the protective order.
Just for council, we do have a camera, which we are filming or transmitting, but it does not cover to screens. And it won't focus on any paper, but we can in fact shut it off if that's the vision of the parties.
From Contura's point of view, Mr. Hearing Officer, thank you, Mr. Executive Director. I don't see any need to shut off the camera. I was aware of the fact that it will not be showing either of the screens.
So just so I'm perfectly clear here, if there's somebody in the room that sees the documents and wishes to make a quote from one of the documents, you want me to order them not to do that?
I think that would be appropriate under the circumstances, yes.
And
And Mr. Hearing Officer, if I may, for the record, there is actually a member of the press corps in the room. He's a reporter. He's going to be reporting on this hearing publicly. I think there's a First Amendment issue if the council actually orders him not to report based on him being here in the room.
right, so that's kind of my concern. I feel perfectly comfortable ordering the attorneys and the parties and anyone under their control not to disclose language from these documents or to disclose the documents themselves. I'm not sure how I would control, I'm not sure I wish to enter an order that extends to the general public or to the press. How do you respond to that, Council?
Well, let me first be perfectly clear. Contura Cole is not here telling any member of the press what to say or not to say. And that's certainly not our intention. I understand that there is a proceeding in state district court involving the confidentiality of this appraisal report. Contura is not a party to that proceeding. And so I would love to hear DEQ's attorney respond to that premise. For our point of view, I have no problem with any member of the press listening, watching, reading whatever is shown on the screen and reporting on that however they see fit. I would have some heartburn over a copy of this document being taken out of this room and used outside the context of the protective order. But again, this is more about what's happening in the state court proceeding and the apparent implications that the Powder River Basin Resource Council made that by having this testimony today, the parties in that other proceeding might somehow be waiving their arguments about confidentiality. This appraisal is, as the council can identify already, hugely important in these proceedings. And so you need to see it, and you need to consider what Mr. Brockman did to arrive at his opinions.
Okay, give the other attorneys an opportunity to weigh in here. Mr. Cassidy?
Well, Mr. Sutton is correct that there is a pending proceeding in State District Court related to whether or not this document should be held confidential by DEQ or not. Judge Sharp is going to decide that issue for us, but at some point in the future. And so we're somewhat hamstrung by the order of these proceedings and not having the district judge's ruling in hand when we come here today. I would note that the parties stipulated that any testimony in which confidential information is likely to refer to or disclosed shall be subject to the following restrictions. And it said that confidential, when this comes up, only persons who are entitled to the confidential information shall be permitted to attend the proceeding in which such testimony occurs. I understand from Mr. Sutton's statement that we want to deviate from that a little bit, and that's probably wise. I think you all have been provided with a copy of the appraisal. The witness has one, the attorneys have one, and the court reporter has one, and nobody else does. And we're not going to show the appraisal on the screen or its contents.
We're not. I just want to make
I
sure
thought we
that's
were,
clear.
so.
No.
We're not going to show it by video, but
Absolutely not. I object to showing it on the screen. I don't object to you reading it in your notebooks or on your iPads.
and would you object to the witness quoting from it?
Right.
We're just going to have to do that. I mean, if Mr. Brockman is going to respond to cross-examination, he's going to have to refer to his report at some point. I think obviously counsel can be judicious about how they quote from this document in order to meet the letter and spirit of the stipulated protective order and to not undermine the district court's opportunity to decide this question that's actually pending before it. And so I think with good judgment on the part of all counsel in these proceedings about how they ask their questions and how much of the report actually has to be disclosed in some measure by a question, we can get through this without too much trouble. And I certainly believe that nothing that occurs in the course of these proceedings, which we're required to have, ought to have any bearing or operate as a waiver on what occurs in the district court. As the disclosures made during the course of this proceeding are compelled, they're not voluntary.
All right, I think I understand so far. Who's next? Are you next in line?
Sure, Mr. Hearing Officer, I'm a little bit unclear on where exactly we stand.
Well, let me state where I think we stand.
Okay, that would be
So
helpful.
far, I don't have a motion to extend the protective order beyond its terms, except that we're going to allow the witnesses to testify, or the witness to testify about the contents of the appraisal.
Okay.
Did I say that right? Okay.
Okay, I think that would be fine with me. I just would note for the record again that Powder River Basin Resource Council firmly believes this appraisal should be public. And we are litigating against the DEQ in that district court proceeding on that very matter. We believe that a variety of different reasons, I won't go into our brief, which Ms. Cassidy will see next week in that proceeding, but we firmly believe there is a claim under the Public Records Act that this document is public. And I would also note what I referred to yesterday, that The protective order specifically was only, to my knowledge, signed by the chair of the EQC. It wasn't actually voted on by the council as a whole. And so I think there's actually a question of whether it even binds the council and properly binds the council for these proceedings, and particularly for the purpose of your Open Meetings Act requirements that you must meet. So I just raised that also again this morning. But I do recognize that it bounds Powder River Basin Resource Council. And we entered into the stipulated protective order to be able to participate today. It was the only way that we could actually see the appraisal in order to meaningfully participate before you this morning. So we recognize it binds us. I do again question how exactly it bounds the council, and I do object to it binding anybody who isn't either a party or a council member or staff of the council, if that makes sense.
Hey, I think we need to hear from the council members, but I think we've got Mr. Freinax.
Just agree with the DEQ and contour. I have nothing new. I don't want to I'll stop.
So we're going through the course of the attorneys now, and we're ready to hear from the council. Any council members wish to be heard on this matter?
Mr. Hearing Officer, this is Dave Bagley. I'd like to read the order. I know we got a whole bunch of orders here, and I'm trying to find which one it is. There's a lot of orders always written by lawyers, it seems, and so they're hard to get regular folks to. There you go. Oh, there it is. All protected orders. Convenient, thank you. It's pretty well stuck to the top, toward the top of your screen like this iPad. It's a stipulated protected order. While they're looking at that, I want to ask the question with regards to our system. It's currently sealed on our system.
The protective order?
No, the documents.
Those two confidential documents?
Yes, are sealed so they can't be seen by anybody,
Including the council members?
including the council member. Can they see it?
Yeah, if they're logged in, they can see it.
If they're logged in.
The parties can see it.
Right. But the council can't see it unless they're logged in. Correct. So that's what I'm trying to point out, is that the council will need to log in on their iPad if they want to see the documents. If not, I also have the documents here. And you got them in there?
They're in the books.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody had access.
And the council has
The reason I bring that up is it is possible for everyone who's a part of the case to see these documents without the public seeing. Mr. Hearing Officer, this is Dave Bagley again. I see the order was signed by our chair, Chair Molly. Madam Chair, perhaps you could just inform the council how you went about reviewing this.
I was the appointed hearing officer for this proceeding, and as such, I want to sign orders matter of the proceeding.
Mr. Hearing Officer, just to be clear, at that point, had it already been referred actually to the Office of Administrative Hearings for you to be the hearing officer in this proceeding?
I don't remember about it.
It was
That was the time.
closed.
It would have been referred by the chair.
Yeah,
You, so I was,
but I don't remember
yeah,
timeline.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was close, it's a good description. I signed, it was close.
Okay. I mean, I think it's an important question, so maybe if we could clarify.
But for what it's worth, as the hearing officer of these proceedings, I hereby order you all to comply with the protective order. I think the real question is whether the council members have authorized it. Council members want to talk about that then, of course.
Mr. Hearing Officer, it strikes me that the relevant question really is, should we deviate from the stipulated protective order to allow us to proceed in light of this provision that says only persons who are authorized by this paragraph to have access to the confidential information shall be permitted to attend the proceedings in which such testimony occurs. What I hear from all the council down the line here is we should deviate from that, and we should not kick anybody out of this room, and we should proceed. And so I don't know that we need a vote. You've heard from every one of the council for the parties, and they say, let's go. So let's deviate, let's go.
I guess the biggest thing is, and you said this on the record, that you were willing to deviate from the protective order. Since you were the ones that entered into protective order, I want to make sure that you understand you are giving up your rights under the protective order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of Control, we don't have any problem with the proposed deviation from the protective order. I agree. All the members of the Environmental Quality Council can look at this appraisal. We can talk about it. Our witness can testify about it. And I agree with Mr. Castee. Let's go.
And Mr. Hearing Officer, just to clarify, because now I think it's clear the protective order no longer applies to these proceedings, does the council then need to make a motion?
That's a significant overstatement. We're talking about one itty-bitty provision. The remainder of it binds us.
But how, I mean, do you have a new protective order? Do you have an amendment in front of you? I mean, what actually is the language of this new agreement that we're agreeing to right now?
Strike out subsection A of that paragraph and proceed.
Right, does the council have a motion to that effect, if that's what you're
I'm
doing?
pretty sure that's what we all just agreed to, so.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Mr. Hearing Officer. Obviously, it seems like we're now talking about this in black and white. Obviously, our position is that all the parties stipulate to the protective order. We are willing to deviate therefrom in a very limited way as described today to continue with this hearing. We are most certainly not willing to scrap the entire protective order.
Any other comments from the council members?
I think we should proceed with the understanding that look at the appraisal, accept the people designated in the protective order, but we can talk about it. I think that's probably what we would all agree to.
Mr. Hearing Officer, just to clarify though, again, there will be readings potentially during testimony on some of that language, so that would also be public. I won't display on the screen, but just so we're all clear that people in the room will hear some contents of this document.
Right, as the presiding hearing officer, I'm prepared to proceed according to the stipulations of the parties. But does Powder River Basin Resource Council request some kind of relief from the the Environmental Quality Council at this point? I can operate the hearing as the hearing officer, but if you were asking for something from the council, please articulate what it is, otherwise we can proceed with it.
Okay, I'm asking actually if the council feels they need to do something as the council, and if not, then we can proceed. I think that's fine.
Mr. Hearing Officer. This is Dave Bagley. The the council's not in the business of trying to understand or Public Records Acts and all that sort of stuff. The whole thing is marked confidential. I don't know what aspects of this are truly confidential or not, the whole thing's marked confidential. But I'm certainly, just as a council member, think we could probably talk about it as long as this document is not released. And I imagine if we get to something that a party feels really should need to be talked about because of confidential, we'll hear an objection from the council.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. I'm willing to proceed in that situation. And Mr. Brockman, along those lines, just maybe give yourself a second or two before you answer my questions in case there are objections from folks down the line for me, if that makes sense. I just want to make sure I'm not violating the protective order and asking you questions. Okay. So Mr. Brockman, you have in front of you in that binder, can you find Contour Call West Exhibit 1 in that binder? And Mr. Brockman, could you explain what this exhibit is?
It's the appraisal report I submitted in July of 2017.
Okay, thank you. Could you turn to page 2 of that appraisal document?
My certification?
Yes, the letter that, this is the letter that you sent to Contura.
Oh, okay.
It's, page 2.
CCW3.
I know, but it's, because we had a cover page. So, there's a bait stamp at the bottom, if this helps, of this exhibit. On the bottom right corner, there'll be a CCW
Yes.
number. Okay, so this is CCW page 2.
Right.
CCW. All right, Mr. Brockman, there's a sentence in here in the second paragraph about the scope of your appraisal and specifically that you appraised only the surface rights of this property. Okay, is that correct? And why did you just look at the surface rights of the property?
I'm not an expert in valuation of minerals.
Okay, were you asked by Contura to only look at the surface rights?
No, I told them that's what I would do.
That's what you would do?
Yeah.
Is it standard for a property appraisal for ranch land in Campbell County to look at both the surface and the mineral rights?
Is it standard? I have never valued the mineral rights. Typically, can I explain?
Sure, yeah.
If you ask me to appraise your ranch and your mineral rights, number one, I would like you to provide me with a mineral search. Tell me what minerals are you own with that ranch.
Okay, well, let's stop there. Did Contura provide that to you?
No, they didn't. I didn't ask for minerals. I just did the surfaces tape.
Okay. So to be clear, you don't actually know who owns the minerals on this property?
No.
Okay. So you don't know whether it's split estates, federal government owns some? You have no idea?
I have no idea.
Okay. And you said typically you don't ever include mineral rights in an appraisal, or have you ever done that? The value of mineral rights in an
Yes.
appraisal?
And in that case, we have had a mineral abstract, if you will, and then I had the latitude, which the client would pay, to hire an expert in the valuation of the mineral estate.
Okay, and is it your understanding that typically if you own the mineral estate, or at least a good portion of it, the value of that land increases?
I would say it depends on what area the property is located in.
And what
I
do you
can
mean?
tell you in Platte County, Wyoming, it doesn't make a nickel's worth of difference.
But it would probably matter in Campbell County, right?
Very well could.
Okay. Because, this land's right next to a surface coal mine, right?
Yes,
And there's some oil and gas out there, right?
yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are you aware of whether any of the coal under any of this property has already been leased to
No,
a company?
I have no idea.
Okay. Are you aware of whether the land or any of the oil and gas resources under this land have been leased to a company?
I know previously there must have been some leasing on the Bel Air Ranch, the northern ranch. There was evidence of the old methane wells around there,
Okay, and we'll get to that in a minute.
okay?
And Mr. Brockman, in the scope of your review, did you review any surface use and damage agreements for either of these parcels?
Surface use agreement for livestock grazing.
But not for
Not
minerals?
minerals, no.
Okay, so you're not aware of whether there's any outstanding agreements for either of these properties that grant access for mineral development?
No, I'm not.
You're not aware, okay. Mr. Brockman, we talked a little bit about how, particularly in Campbell County, if the mineral estate is included in the property, that might increase that value of the property, correct?
Could?
It could. What if the opposite's true and the owner of the land doesn't actually own the mineral estate? Does that decrease the value or affect it in any way?
Not that I can tell. Most of all the sales that I used were surface estate. The minerals were excluded. So minerals.
Appraisals you've done over the years, said you've done a whole bunch of appraisals, so I assume some of those appraisals and you've done split estate land and, right?
Yes,
And you've done like fee land that includes mineral estate.
the minerals were never questioned. Who owned the minerals? Sometimes they would state in the granting conveyance that they give everything that they might have. Sometimes they might say, we'll keep it for 10 years. They might put in a production clause that if it produces, then we get to hang on to it for another period of time. But I never saw any difference in value.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. Mr. Brockman, you also mentioned you're a real estate agent or a broker, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so when you've listed property and sold it, do you have to disclose whether property is split estate or not? And the ownership of that mineral interest?
If you know it, yes.
And why do you have to do that under your rules?
You know, I think the state mandated a little law about that not too long ago.
Sure. And do you have any opinion on why that's important?
You know, I don't know if it was because of the minerals, oil, gas, coal, or if it was at the same time when they said you couldn't split off the wood rights to a property.
Okay, that's fine if you don't know. All right, could you turn to page 15 of this document that we've been talking about?
We're using those page numbers at the bottom.
Yeah, we are. So it's page 12 of 77 is your number, and then 15 down there at the bait stamp below. Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So could you, are you aware that, is there a portion of your appraisal document that includes a sentence, much of the land is held for future mining of coal? Do you remember writing that?
Yes.
Okay. And why did you write that in your appraisal?
You know, that was probably a bad assumption on my part.
Okay, have you corrected your appraisal since then? To correct that assumption?
Have I corrected that verbiage?
Yeah.
No, I have not.
Okay, why would you say it's a bad assumption?
I assumed it because there was a coal mine right next door to it that the folks owned.
Okay, but again, you didn't check the mineral ownership, so you
No, I
didn't really
did
know
not.
whether
No, I
that was
did
true or
not.
not. Okay. In your opinion, Mr. Brackman, is the properties used for future coal mining? If it would be used for future coal mining, would that affect its value at all?
Well, it would no longer be an agricultural property.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was getting at. That you say kind of the future use of this land is ranch land, and that's where it gets its value, right?
That's correct.
But if, say it's a coal mine, you can't really run a cattle ranch on it anymore, right?
No, not till they're done and they reclaim it.
Okay, all right, thanks. So let's switch subjects and go to page 9 of this document. And that's it's page 6 of 77. And there's-
So we're at 9 or 60?
Yeah, we're at 9, so the date stamp number 9.
Okay,
Are you with me?
yes.
Okay. So is it true that this page kind of talks about your facts and conclusions related to the appraisal, right?
Kind of a summary, I elaborated on it, I think, further in the report.
Sure. For the basis of discussing this change, is it true that you just looked at the sales comparison approach to
Yes.
value this property?
That's correct.
Okay, you didn't look at the cost approach
No, I did not.
or the income approach?
I didn't use either.
You didn't use either. And could you explain to the council members what these 3 approaches are and what they do and how you normally consider them in an appraisal?
The cost approach is you value the site, the land, and then you value the depreciated replacement cost new of buildings. The buildings on here are older. The value, contributory value to the entire property is negligible. It would just be an exercise that wasting time and money.
Okay.
The income approach is based on the net income that you would derive from a property, in this case ranching, income from grazing cattle. Typically, you estimate that income based on leasing rather than individual owners because of the variability of operators. So then you grab a cap rate, capitalization rate, an overall capitalization rate from sales. And you apply that rate that you feel is representative of the market to the property that you're appraising. Those capitalization rates are all over the board and that's why I did not use them.
Okay. Do you ever use the cost or income approach in appraising ranch land?
Very seldom.
Very seldom. Can you explain a little bit about when you would use either of those approaches?
If there was enough data, that would be an indicator of value.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so new subject, also on that page. It looks like you didn't include an estimate of marketing time on this page. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's go to page 10. So the next page.
Okay.
And Is it true that you also didn't include an estimate of marketing time for the second parcel of land,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. Let's go to page 14. And, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you see that bottom section
Yes.
that talks about exposure and marketing time estimates?
Yes.
Right, okay. So I'm gonna ask you to read the last sentence of that
I have
section.
not expressed an opinion as to the marketing time of the property, as this was not a condition of my appraisal contract.
Okay, so same thing, right? You didn't include an estimate of marketing time because no one asked you to.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Bachman, are you aware of any part of your appraisal that speaks to the cost an owner of the property would incur in trying to sell the property?
Did I address those costs?
Right.
No, I did not.
You did not, okay. Did DEQ or Contura ask you to provide an estimate of those costs that a property owner would incur in trying to sell the property?
No, they did not.
They did not, okay. Mr. Bachman, you mentioned that, again, you're a broker in addition to an appraisal, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in your experience selling property, if, say you have to break it up to sell it, do those costs that a property owner incur, would they be greater if you have to sell the parcel in pieces? Are you
No,
following me?
I don't think so, no.
You don't?
I've sold ranches, either private treaty auction and we'll go G3, then we'll ask the audience. It could be a 2-day affair, but not additional cost to the sell.
Okay, divine parcels, are there separate